2021, 2022 is a lot of organizations started, replacing their resignations with the youngsters.
I think if you I are going to look out for jobs, we're definitely going to look at a lot of things in social media, let it be your LinkedIn or let it be your Ambition Box or Glassdoor. So I think it is shifting right now.
I think there was a lot of possible fluff around it, your annual days, your engagement fund and all of that, which was good, but not sustainability, right?
I think there is a lot that is spoken in a different way, and there's a lot of shift around how employers want to be seen, especially to your potential candidates. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the RoundTable Central, hosted by Plan-Story-Decision. I'm Dhivya, and I'm here to moderate this conversation. We have an amazing set of panelists here who are going to be discussing about employer branding. We'll start with a round of introduction. Nicola, you're first.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Dhivya. Glad to be here with the fellow panelists. I'm Nicola Varghese. I've been in the HR domain space for about 20 years, predominantly in business HR. More recently, I've been exploring the world of neuroscience and how that applies to leadership and just managing oneself as well. So glad to be here and interested to know about the views and opinions of others during this conversation. Thank you.
That's lovely to hear. Welcome. Oh, dear Shashank.
All right. Thank you, Divya, and thanks, Plan-Story Digital. My name is Shashank, and I come with about close to 20 plus years experience in talent acquisition. Worked in different sectors from e-commerce to BFSI to quick commerce to currently with an edtech company. A cricket enthusiast as well. Represented the city in a couple of league crickets right now, and coming here to definitely explore how the panels are talking about employer branding and how things have shifted. Thank you.
That's lovely to hear. Such a depth of knowledge. I'll get that.
Hey, thanks everyone. My name is Anil. I have been in talent acquisition for about 34 years now. Worked with some big Indian brands, some global market leaders in space, IT industry. Did India roles, did regional roles like Asia Pacific, Japan, China, did global roles. Has been a fantastic journey in talent acquisition. And could be one of those few guys in this market today who have done only talent acquisition throughout life. So, but that has been a great journey. Of course, outside of job, I do a band, I do a number of other things, but that's what life pushes me on. So great to hear the topic. It's such an overwhelming topic for many, many organizations. And I think we would assume that the next 45 minutes is very interesting. Thanks.
That's lovely to hear. And I think we have an impressive set of panelists who have the depth and the breadth of what we are talking about. And today, when we speak about employer branding in general, there is a pre and a post-pandemic shift that has happened, right? And I think there is a lot that is spoken in a different way, and there's a lot of shift around how employers want to be seen, especially to your potential candidates. Nicola, what do you think has actually shifted in this time frame?
A lot, and I think we're quite into the post-pandemic thing now. After a few years, we'll stop referring to it because the norm has changed. And, things like remote working, flexibility, part-time, different genres of the way one commits to a career is very different now. We're also having a very different shift in the workforce. So at the end of the day, I would think we're actually getting better at realizing what's important. I think there was a lot of possible fluff around it, your annual days, your engagement fund and all of that, which was good, but not sustainability, right? The sustainability factor really hit hard during the pandemic. And I think everyone realized the humaneness of the fact that people are in the job. And it's not just something that will run without people, right? How much ever advanced and technologically, backed up you are as a company. So when it comes to people, it's always complex. And I think some of the complexities have been started peeling a little more. People are accepting different versions of the individual at work. India did really well with respect to the diversity, inclusion, and equity space. We also are very high in terms of adapting to different cultures because we're exposed to so much more of that ecosystem. Just being in one country, you've got exposure of so many cultures worldwide, right? Because of the MNCs investing here. So I think it's definitely shifted for the better. The sustainability, in my view, will still be a question as to how the landscape adapts to the changes of the population, because 1/3 is Gen Zs, right? So I'm going to be more, and then the likes of us constantly. It's like keeping us on our toes. We're constantly struggling to understand what's shifting, what's changing, what's triggering. So employers, employees, branding, wherever that's concerned, even in social media, it's a big thing individually to brand yourself. So it's a topic that is close to home for everyone today, which wasn't the case earlier. So I think with respect to the topic at hand, that itself has become a new normal, right? Brand yourself. Many of us just didn't know that as a topic earlier. So yeah, I think that's here to stay for sure.
That's amazing, because just to hear that it has gotten better, and just a segue to the next kind of question that I have for Anil. Looking at the years of experience that you have in this personal space, and Nicola's view on that we had actually gotten better, did you think that, is it your personal opinion that the Great Resignation has actually contributed to it? With a shift?
Yes and no. I think sometimes we get into the shale of anxiety industry without realizing that there are millions of employees outside of IT industry who never had a flexibility of working from home. You can manufacture. So many of them, of course, lost their jobs during the pandemic, but when they started, you need to be in the office 6 days, not even 5 days. So I think from that perspective, the employer branding journey from the 60s, of the 70s, of the 80s, and now, there's been a huge change. I think one thing which has happened beyond 2021, 2022 is a lot of organizations started, replacing their resignations with the youngsters. So let's take a case like someone with about 15, 17 years experience move out, and the replacement is a 5-year, 6-year experience. Also, maybe 30, 35%, 40% of your employee workforce are in that age group, which essentially means that your employer branding audience has shifted. So, you're playing the game along with this new gen. And that has been a big change. That's one. Second, I think what I have not seen big change in employer branding is what I said, the non-IT sector. They have very strong fundamentals. They have lived their life through that. And there has been a few changes here and there, but unlike the IT industry, which always has a global lens for their employer branding, many of the if you look at automobile industry, internet industry, power industry, semiconductor industry, their employer branding efforts have, there has been a change, but not as rapid as what we see in IT or IT-related industry. So I think, there has been a change, but it depends upon which industry you're referring to. But one thing is for sure, saying that the amount of importance employer branding used to have when I started my career, late 80s, and what it is today, human change. People live employer branding, read employer branding. People today read about vision statements,
values
before even applying for a job, which was never the case when we came out of our colleges. So I think that has been a big change.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the both of you brought in two different spectrums of it, and we were talking about two different generations being in the workforce itself, and how diversity, inclusion has kind of come in from a workforce perspective and from the domain perspective itself, right? The way people were imagining employer branding had to be shifted around the people, and I think this whole concept of employer branding, has it really shifted into employment branding there? The question for you.
See, it's two ways of looking into it. I said yes and a no. Earlier, employer branding predominantly was with the marketing team or with the HR teams or the talent acquisition team about how do you want to look at selling the organization to the candidates coming in or to the employers coming in. But now I think it's completely shifting towards lived experience. I think about the CEOs talking about storytelling about their own work, about how it is going. So I think employment branding also is shifting completely in terms of figuring out what kind of testimonials are people talking about, how are the kind of real-time experience these people are bringing in. If you go back, like how Anil was explaining, talking to us about 15, 20 years back, we only went by the brand name or what HR could publicize in terms of a job description or what kind of role he or she would be playing. But today, I think if you I are going to look out for jobs, we're definitely going to look at a lot of things in social media, let it be your LinkedIn or let it be your ambition box or Glassdoor. So I think it is shifting right now. And I think people are moving towards lived experiences currently rather than looking at what is on advertisement. It is currently shifting.
And when I speak about lived experiences, the concept of authenticity and the values that we're speaking about in employer branding as a space actually has kind of taken over, right? What are your views on that, Nicola?
Being in HR, I always used to say I'm rubbish at marketing. So I think my view is very clear on that. You need to be able to have substance to talk about things. But having said that, the whole landscape's very different, right? So we were just having an informal conversation about an hour back when all of us came in about how that balance of authenticity is being challenged today, right? Earlier, you were good at a certain sport or whatever it may be, and you had that pride and credit to talk about it. Today, there are millions doing the same thing. When you talk about social, again, media, and because a lot of companies have pivoted towards social media kind of branding to tap into that demography that is so used to getting their information through that platform. It's just, it's very tough to be authentic. And I think it's become even tougher because of the remoteness of people. Just kind of bringing this to a neuroscience thing that I learned recently. What's interesting is that, when we connect during the pandemic, a lot of us couldn't function because we were such social creatures. And that's actually part of everybody's ecosystem, whether you're an introvert, extrovert, honestly doesn't matter. So that connectivity that was there tended to give us cues about how one would react in different situations. Is one authentic? Is one not? It's a different thing if your gauge is working or not. Okay, but then when you bring that up to a scale, a level of virtuality only, that's where the trickiness comes in, right? How do you maintain authenticity in a almost all 100% virtual world? So it's tough to see through all of that. But yes, to your question, it's important.
Yeah.
I think people have started beginning to see through it because at the end of the day, what's new sticks around only that much, right? So that whole thing of, wow, whether you talk about an employer brand or even, a certain offering that's there by an organization and so on, if you're a candidate, sometimes you can see through all of that faff, and that's the sad part because there's more of a backlash that you can face as soon as you make some decisions. So your decision-making capacity is like your entire prefrontal cortex, your ACC, like all of those come into play. And it requires those physical cues, which today is not really there. I'm not able to meet my first interviewer, could potentially be someone virtually, right? And for all I know, when I meet the person looks different, feels different, talks a different language. We know it. So how do you cut through that? And how do you know that, hey, this is the real game that I want to be part of? So it's not an easy decision to make both on the employer and the employee side. Authenticity is not something that comes very quickly, right, to most people.
But on that note, and a question to you. So is there do you think that organizations which have a social mission that we're talking about, or the area that they have chosen, are at a better stage because they're able to relate to people who come in? What's your opinion?
See, it is again, it depends on how we're going to be showcasing the organization across right now. It again depends on what is that he or she is looking from the organization. Is it like they're looking for a lot of pomp from the organization perspective, or they're looking at what is it in for them in the organization. Now, of course, if you ask me, social media presence really does matter, because all of us want to look at brands, we want to look at what is in store for us. But having said that, that would play a game. But along with that, like I was mentioning about lived experience, I think it's very important to know what the company's vision and values are also coming through. Because social media presence can look really wow on paper. People can see this is what now. Is it what is actually being given to them when they come on board, or is it just being put across to just attract talent? So it is about how and what is it that you're going to value, and how deep you're going to get inside and figure out what is it in store for them matters quite a lot.
I think when we speak about employer branding, employment branding, personal branding, where does leadership here kind of kick in? Right? Like what is this that they can take up as a responsibility? Because it's a very, very tricky space for anyone to be in. And what are your thoughts on that?
No, Dhivya, from a talent acquisition perspective, to give you a couple of examples, there was a time when we used to train the security at the main gate, saying, how do you behave with a candidate? And we used to do a survey as to what kind of people would walk in, and they would say, you would have candidates, you would have suppliers coming in, you would have some vendors coming in. So, the first person whom you meet in an organization, irrespective whether it's a full-time employee or a security, is a security. So even he is told, or is someone who sits in the reception is told, how do you manage? So that's one part of it. The second, which I was personally involved for a lot many years, was train interviewers. How do you speak to a candidate? There was a very interesting data which came up a few years back. I don't remember where, but they said that almost 65% of the interviewers don't even introduce themselves at the beginning of an interview.
Yeah.
What do they do? How long have been there? The year. So it looks very, very simple things can be done the right way. I don't want to make this employer branding complex, but there are very, very simple things which you could do. The interviewer is happening. Similarly, you complete an interview process. When do you want to give the final feedback to the intake? You don't keep a candidate hanging forever.
Yeah.
Okay, you would have your own business reasons, but then I think these are some of those 5 or 10 or 15 things which can really impress on a good candidate, rather than a fantastic video. I remember that probably it was in late 90s or early 2000 when organizations decided not to use models and bring in their own employees into this video to bring in genuinity. But some of these employees are not very camera friendly, and the way they talk, the way they do the voiceover really looks very artificial here. But I think the behavior, the way we manifest ourselves in front of a candidate, or for that matter, any external stakeholder, I think these are some of the things that need to be demonstrated. And it has to be in a very pronounced manner. It cannot be a one-off thing, as we consider. Everyone, all of us, or most of us have been candidates ourselves. I'm purely talking from a talent acquisition.
Yeah.
We've all been candidates. We always would love to see that, company was waiting for me to come. The interviewer was waiting for me to interview.
True.
They're responding back in time. They have promised me a day to let the final offer come in. That's one. And the third component is, which I thought we referred earlier also, was candidates who don't make it in the interview.
Yes.
They should go back and say, you know what? I didn't make it, but I had a fantastic candidate experience. I would want to reapply for a job again in 6 months. That is a parameter of which you measure, your culture or point running. Not once am I saying that the big stages and platforms and billboards are not important, but on the ground, in today's world, it's so easy to get inputs from your friends and your academics about urbanization. Right? This becomes important. And these are simple ways of doing it rather than making it complex.
Dhivya, just to give you another piece from a perspective of not the candidate, but the employee now, right? You mentioned leadership. So I think leadership decides a lot of that, right? So the decision making, the actual, are you walking the talk in a sense? So from an employee perspective, you're constantly calibrating. Is this what I signed up for? Is this what I signed up for? Is this what I signed up for? Hey, no, this is not what I signed up for finally, right? At some point, like for whatever reasons that happens in cycles for different people. So I think leadership, again, there's a lot that can influence positively. I don't think we've tapped into that enough, whether it's life stories, whether it's, just ensuring that someone who can connect with people is there. Back in the day, we used to have people, there was this thing, management by walking. And I remember saying, oh my God, I think at a very naive stage of my career saying, what's that going to get for anyone? But if you look back now, that actually had a lot of merit to it.
Yeah.
So even managers being viewed as leaders, right? Now, normally we ensure that just the 5 to 7% of the organization is what we call leadership. It's incorrect, right? Everyone ends up being a leader in some form or the other. So are you providing that uniqueness to the individual to own that when you're talking about employer branding? You are an employee, you own your branding. When I go out, like it was in school, right? We were not allowed to go in our uniform to, places of leisure because there is a line that's drawn, whether you call it, too critical or whatever it may be in towards today's world. There was a necessity of that uniform in a certain structure, and there was a necessity for leisure to be a different form of, clothing, for instance. But just with that example, one would know that the lines were clear, right? At the end of the day, when you're at work, you're here for a certain purpose. You're here to maybe bring your best self forward with respect to your skills, your knowledge, your information, and so on. So that's what it is. Sometimes I also feel that the whole leadership struggles, and I'm part of it, right? As HR, we're like this with the business leaders. So you can sense that it's happening. The leadership themselves, and I'm not talking about the 5-10%, but from the mass middle layer onwards, which is your middle cone onwards, struggles with the fact that they just may or may not be able to influence that feeling of, does this brand bring me pride? That pride component is really tough. And there's no one answer fits all. And to his point, like candidates may act differently during interviews, similarly, leaders act differently in situations. But have I develop that plasticity to say that, I can navigate my employee through this situation. I'm responsible for it. And thus the employee has a good experience and thus becomes your brand ambassador. So it's really, again, the simplest thing are the toughest to do, on the ground. And HR, for the most of it, we try to be the conscience without having the halo around us. But at the end of the day, it's a battle day in and day out.
Just to add to that, I think when the purpose becomes personal is when it becomes real, is what I believe. And I think leadership really matters. And I think the purpose of a leadership has to be very real rather than trying to have a very cinematic kind of a thing. Or I think it's very important, very pragmatic about the leadership approach as well towards it. That's when you feel very real about the organization. I think leadership really plays a major role into it.
It's just impressive how we have two sides of the spectrum, wherein Anil was speaking more about the actions of the people who are the first phase of the organization that people walk into. And there is another side to it where they are trained, or what do they look for, or do they walk the talk, and how do purpose gets converted into a behavior which can directly translate into an action in the long run. And it's not just about the leadership, it's about how strategy needs execution, right? And that's the whole agenda of this conversation that we are having, which is a great segue for my next question, right? We talk about cultural messaging a lot, right? But there are instances where there are a lot of organizations where the way it is presented externally and the way it is actually understood internally, they are probably miles apart, or very, very in line, or just perceived in a different way. Again, it goes down to the people who are looking at it, right? For example, the way Anil said, if somebody walks in and the first person they meet, they smile and they greet you with a fellow human compassion, the impression that we leave on the table is something that is intangible, and people probably do not see the value of it. But there is another flip side to it, that people are probably doing that because they are subject, as individuals, they are like that, right? Minus the training or minus whatever impressions that I've done. But what's your take on how are things internally perceived? How are we presenting it externally? And how do we bridge that gap? And what happens if it really isn't bridged?
I think it's very important to have a a very get through experiences that has to be done. See, like people have a lot of assumptions about how the internal messaging is going on to an external. I think it's very important to have a center point where we can look at what is the best that is going to work for an organization. Now, there are, like, for example, you have a big tech company which is advertising saying that there is a lot of flexibility that's involved into it, but do they really have it? So the employee voices are very important to have those things, talk about those experiences that they're actually going about, saying, hey, you know what, this has actually been happening in the organization, talking about what are the kind of live experiences that they're getting, what kind of projects they're trying to work around. Now, let it be global mobility the company is providing. Is it really mean to say that? Is it just being only showcasing, or is those things really happening as such? And to add to all of these things, I think rather than trying to figure out what's on social media, figuring out if this company is doing this, I think looking at those organization people who are doing those things really matters to us.
It's amazing that you brought up this point, because people who are actually walking the dog, how do we send signals if you're misaligned? How do we start looking at while we speak about a central set of people who have these as their goals to kind of work towards? How do we become those signs if there is a misalignment?
It's not tough, seriously. I think, the first day in office, you find a lot of things, and all of us have gone through that. That's one. Second is, I think the fact is, see, each one of us have our own definition of culture. Working with a nice manager means a lot. Or, working in an environment where I have flexible hours means a lot. Or working in a place where, even after 5 p.m, I can go and play basketball, or I can do stuff like that. So I think each one of us looks at culture in a very different way. So on the first day, you realize that what I read or what I saw in the video and what I've seen in the ground is different. Now, there will be a dent.
Yeah.
There will be a 1.2x all your videos. So there are some realities in life which will settle in the first 24 to 48 hours. But the challenge is how big is it? And what I have seen in my personal life is some of the shockers for the fresh grads who come in. For the experienced guys who have worked in a couple of organizations, they know that, okay, these are some of the realities.
Yeah.
But for some of the grads who come in, who might have gone through some of those videos, and in fact, today morning I was seeing a video where the corporate video was focusing on the foot joints there, the basketball court there, and on things like that. Now, the grads coming in from the college, they feel, this is not what I saw. This is not what I think. My guess is, for experienced guys, it takes about a week to figure out. And that's not about, the foot joints and all that. It's about, when you go wrong in your job, how does it get escalated? What's the culture in this place? Do my boss's boss get to know that my bait spillings were not correct? Or, I think those are some of those cultural triggers. It's about how things get escalated. How are you appreciated? How are you taken into the organization when you're a new employee? Those are some of those initial things which you figure out. Rest is, as saying, it's a bit of a fluff, but, it's all about you work in that place for 1 week or 2 weeks, and you start realizing, say that, okay. And we all have gone through those initial stages. Some leaders like PPTs, some leaders
Mentor Gaka.
Some people say that don't meet your boss on a Monday morning. Bad. Office and gone through that. No, those are some of those cultures. But I think over a period of time, you start realizing that, okay, there are going to be some deltas of what I saw in the videos, but the bottom line is, if I'm growing, learning, blah, 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 it's fine. And as long as I'm respected for my work and for my personality.
Yeah, just to add to that, also, you don't need the first day, second day also to know, like, I think the engagement that the candidate gets through when he gets an offer about how the company is taking care of him, Like some of us have a 30 days, 60-day notice periods that we go on. I think it's very important. Like Anil and I come with about close to, I think, 30 and 20 years of experience in TA. I think it's very important for the organization to keep the candidate warm and figuring out what are the early warning signals that he or she would show. So, for example, for me, if I have a candidate with about 60 or a 90 days period, what is the kind of engagement that we do for a candidate? Are we really engaging the candidate, trying to talk to the candidate, figuring out what are the early warning signals he or she shows? Like, has she resigned from a current company? Does she have a resignation acceptance? Now call her over to office for a coffee with a hiring manager, talk through about what. So if these are certain things, like if somebody is going to join the organization, will feel really wow about saying that, hey, you know what, this company is actually valuing me now. They're actually trying to get me into office, have a coffee with my manager, trying to talk to me what kind of projects the company is coming in, sending out newsletters to them saying that what are the kind of growth plans the organization has. So I think it's very important for us to have this entire journey, that 30, 60, 90 days of notice period journey, to build an amazing employer brand, because two things that comes out of it. One is an early warning signal if he or she would join the company. If not, I think you're already making sure that you won this candidate coming in through. I think that's something which you need to work with. See, everybody will again move out saying that I have another offer, I have this, but I think these kind of value propositions, if we can build into a person coming on board, feels that this company really values me coming into the organization.
And the flip side also works, right? Because at the end of the day, everyone's moving on.
Yeah.
Unlike maybe a few decades back where the deal was to stay in the role for however long you want.
Yeah.
And there was not much competition pushing you out of your seat. So I think the deal is, can the person talk about the brand with that much nostalgia? It may not come back as a boomerang, but now you know that alumni have started seeing so much more of hiring. So I think that's what the essence of it
True.
then gets into the reality, right? Because convincing your people who are leaving to carry your brand is so much more important in that sense, because it gives you that 2x, 3x in the market where value is concerned. And people coming in fact, should be liaising with people moving out for the right reasons, right? Well, if you see the reasons of exit would be just your 10, 15 usual suspects, which we are fed up of in HR. We want to see what's behind the veil, which only the managers or HR or anyone in the peer group may know. Now, that doesn't need to be revealed, but what's your entire experience? What are your moments of truth from day one to now? Can't be all bad, right? There have to be some highlights to it. So why not highlight the highlights, right? And also, I think as an employee, one, to his point, needs to be very clear that it's not a game to convince you and put you on a throne. No career will give you that.
True.
You have to learn to meet midway.
Yeah.
You have to learn to accept that you're there to learn. More so between that 0 to 10, 15 years experience. And I think it just becomes more after that, because you're competing so much more on a different level altogether, right? So I think that awareness is minimal. And that's why we have this, I'm resigning because the working hours are like this. It's not beyond the process of things, right? It's the depth of in which the employee also wants from the organization a career. How much are they owning it? I mean, from a business partnering point of view, that's such a gap. And we've tried for decades to try to address it with a lot of the employer side doing things where the branding is concerned. But the ownership to the employee has always been the gap.
It's such an impressive conversation. It leads me to ask a under-tapped point here, right? The alumni. And we spoke about employer branding, employee branding, personal branding, whatever be it. We take a lot of pride from where we've completed our schooling, our university, and so on. But I don't think we've really thought about that as a concept in employer branding, right? So, Shashank, a question to you, just taking a cue from Nicola's insights. What do you think that we should be probably looking into?
See, like you said, I think it's a very less utilized alumni that we all do. Like when Nicola brought in and talking about this, I think it's very important for us to go back to the roots that we have got into and talk about what is this college or university has got us to in, because it's very important to inspire the next generation of people coming in. Again, We have the IITs, we have the IIMs who are coming in. People go back as alumni, but very less are people from universities like the Bangalore University or Jain or maybe some of the colleges that we come in. We haven't gone back and spoken and told what has this college actually given to us. So I think by talking to these alumni, as an alumni, going and talking about what is it in store for these guys, what can they foster into coming into this, really going to matter. And I think this will help us in terms of bringing in more people into the current organization. Like I can give you an example. Being a cricketer, I think Rahul Dravid most often not goes to some of his school that he studied, and there's old boys association. He inspires a lot of cricketers saying that, hey, you know what, I have studied in this school, this is what my school had given me, they give me hours to go ahead and practice. I don't think none of us have actually done that. I think alumni branding is very, very important to get an organization back on its foot. And I think we ourselves as leaders who've been talent acquisition, business partner or marketing, going back and telling that, hey, you know what, this college did provide me a platform where I was part of some of the cultural shows. I was able to do a lot, walk and talk with the principals. These are things that you can always inspire people and say that, hey, you know what, these are things that I can really bring into the perspective. So I think it's very important. And I think the great thing that Nicole brought in about alumni, I think we really need to look into and see how we can actually build that brand as well there.
And it flips the narrative, right? I think the whole concept of employer branding is more about how do I want to be seen outside in the
Exactly.
market. But we miss out on the people who have probably worked with us for so long who can be the best spokesperson. So they're not the villains in a way that they chose to move on for whatever reasons that they are. And it kind of sets a great culture in terms of aligning what is the experience somebody has in terms of while they were here in this job, and while they leave, how are they going to have a conversation? And this kind of brings up another important point for me to kind of check in with Anil itself, right? We've heard leaders being hired. So all the while we speak about people who might not have a lot of influence in around how the culture is set on the floor. But let's talk about few leaders who are actually hired, who have a lot to unlearn, learn this 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah.
We're talking about keeping them warm. But I think in an area they also go through in terms of unlearning what they were accustomed to and probably getting into the new brew of things, right? How do you think we can actually tap into this? Because these leaders are probably going to reach out to the alumni itself to actually understand what's on the ground, how things are, is it exactly where it is. Juniors kind of probably look at more on the videos that are presented on the floor by for leaders who have been seasoned in this area. They speak to people who have exited the organization. How do you think we can change that now?
If I don't know what we can change the narrative, honestly. But let's assume that when we're hiring a leader, he's smart enough to understand that he needs to unlearn a few things when he lands into a new organization. I think that is one of the biggest things many leaders feel. That's one. And second is the fact that, in the last 10, 15 years, that has been a bit of a paradigm shift. Whenever there is a leadership role taking opened, the first choice is internal. And one of the reasons for that is it's so difficult to imbibe a new culture for a leader. And that we have seen in a number of large organizations. We used to jokingly say within our own team, saying that even if the second in command is 70% fit to do the role, he probably has a better chance of succeeding than an external person who's seen that internal person doing. But coming to your topic of once you hire an external person, some of the smart guys I have seen in my past 2-3 jobs is even before they accept our offer or even before they come on board, they would have spoken to the predecessor or the person who has left the job in the past, or at least some of the few, what we call the LT members, leadership team members, because particularly in the IT industry, the LT members are so well connected. They get to know each other. They know each other well. They talk to them. They would have worked with them at some point of time in the past. So I think a lot of people do that. But they are also very conscious in that I'm not going to be biased by what I do. I will make my own decisions when I land in this thing. I have personally seen that happening in the sense that, I was doing the onboarding of some of the leadership roles in my past jobs. And, some of the smart ones would not even talk for the first 60 days. It's listening, and only listening. And when you realize that the leader is talking more, then okay, and now we have a problem in hand. This needs to be sorted out. And so I think there's a mixed variety of these people, but I think most of the leaders whom an organization would hire, the most important thing they would see is culture is embedded.
True.
In the last 10 years, 15 years, including IT industry, we would have hired leaders like nothing to do with this industry. They've been hired because of the leadership skills.
True.
And there are a lot of real good examples in front of us in Bangalore and India. So I think the culture of fitment becomes an important trait to be evaluated, and they bring in that. They stay connected with the ground, they talk to the predecessors, they listen, they have their own charter for this first 60 months, 60 days, 90 days before they make their first move. I think that's what some of the smart ones do. And if a leader leaves a job with the first 18 to 24 months, it means that he has spotlight.
Yeah.
And I think that's where let's all agree that a leader starts contributing 12 to 16 months.
Very true. Just to another one, Divya. Well, Anil was talking about growing the internal person to leadership role. That itself is an employer branding, right? Now, you have a leader, a VP level who's leaving the organization. You have a director who's hungry for the role, and you're trying to elevate that person into that role because, like Anil was mentioning, he's already 70% fit for you. He knows the culture. Now, elevating a director or senior director to that role and giving that responsibility and giving him that thing, make sure the pyramid always remains to be the same. And people below would always look up and say, hey, this organization is valuing the employer. And while that gentleman, once he gets promoted internally, whatever it is, updates his social media status and talks about like some of those things that he goes about, feels wow with the organization. And I think some of the companies have really grown well because of letting the people grow within the organization and they hold that thing, right? Like you nurture your own talent coming up, and that really gives you a spectrum of saying that what does the organization actually value to them.
Got a little bit of a different view.
So I would love to hear.
Maybe because I've shifted organizations. But I think it's true. Okay, there is a lot of merit in looking at people who've been exposed to that. Again, there is a bit of a balance because it could tip over too much to the fact that everyone's imbibed in that so-called culture and then they don't know better, right? So like we know in our past, there have been leadership changes globally, mostly, whether it's tech or FMCG or whatever else. A change in a leader would literally mean everything else down the line. There's some change, there's some impact. Good or bad, it's left up to each one of us to interpret and how it affects my role, my environment, etc. But there is a change. So whenever there's a change in leadership, there will be a change in the way things are done, whether it is for the larger good of things and what's the collateral damage that comes with it is something that one needs to weigh out. I think when we've referred to leadership here, we've, a lot of you all are using he, and I'm just bringing in the concept of can we think broader, right? I mean, not just the gender part of it.
Yeah.
Can we think broader that even with certain things that come to the management table, the stuff can actually be done by a lot of other people. So when you're branding, if you want to talk about a career journey, actually remove that element of the day-to-day and give it to your middle management who are much more, knowledgeable about that piece and can make those decisions because that knowledge is high. I think leadership sometimes, again, like I said, it gets stuck at a certain level, which needs to be shaken out of that mold. And people should not be discussing at that level things about, how do we have flexible hours or not? Ask the people, figure it out. Maybe some departments can, maybe some can't for good reasons, right? Because the domain is like that. And again, during the pandemic, we got to know about that, right? And we were feeling, it was a backlash, right? One part of that domain needed to go in, had to risk their health. So it's a question of how much do you weigh in? So again, I think it's internal talent, external talent, point being there is talent, how you dipping into it and how you ensuring that that person really then there's an ROI of hiring that particular leader. Because the 30, 60, 90 days is nothing. Like we've come up with new leadership assimilation, the works in terms of, again, hand-holding them through the organization's culture and so on and so forth. But tomorrow if that same leader suddenly says, I don't want XYZ person in the team, and just because they don't want the person,
So it's about
who's going to say, and who's going to say, okay, no, that can't be the case, right? So a lot of times we don't have control over the kind of leadership that we're hiring, because even the employer doesn't really know the full side of the leadership that they're hiring. But at the end of the day, I think it's just how does that leadership benefit, whether it is growth, profit, margins, revenue, whatever it may be, but how do they take the people along? I think that for some reason is very diluted, right? They say if you have team meetings, lunches, I mean, all of that you're supposed to do, yeah.
We are done with that
Right?
part.
Yeah. I mean, even we as team members are done with that. We want more, right? How is the leader able to engage the person from day one to say, this is the reason why your role is important.
Yeah.
And here, this is how it links to the strategy map that I have for you. Yeah. But you need to define how you want to get there. So I think the whole conversation around how a leader comes across, whether in a managerial role, whether in a leadership role, whether in a mentorship, mentee, whatever role, the conversation is important. I think that's where we should be investing more.
True.
From what I read in all your insights is it's about finding the balance between the vintage and the new, and the ability to mix things up and not just lay this on leadership alone, but actually people on the ground who understand the nuances of what's happening, and also understanding how do we diversify this, right? It's not just about how you're perceived or how you want to be perceived, or not stick to very conventional ways of how we think engagement works, right? It's also about how do we bring people along, go along that journey together, right? And I think that was brilliant just to even, these are conversations we can have for hours together for sure. But because you brought out the concept of an ROI, right? Interestingly, my kind of a last question for the day is, are we investing enough? Because just at the depth of this conversation, the very topics that we can explore, are we really investing enough? When I say investing, it might not be just about the money here, right? It might be tangible or intangible. It can be the depth, it can be in trainings, it can be in learning, it can be whatever form that we're talking about. So is your personal opinion of wherever you have the experience of working, are we investing enough? Are we looking into it enough? Or can we do more?
Look into what specifically?
In general, employee branding, just as a concept, as the story that we're talking about, the depths, the balancing act that each one of us go through in the journeys that we take in our professional side of spec.
My view is, like we started the whole conversation, right? There is things that are being done. How are we leveraging from that doing versus impact? There is a huge difference. There's a gap still. How do we sustain that impact is another. If I speak for myself, again, I've never been big on being able to market. It's a known gap, right? And in some situations, you understand that you need to do it, or you need to market your people. Let's come to that. Being a manager, being a leader, you need to market your people, right? During performance management, you need to be able to package what they did well. So yes, so it does come. All of us have a part to play. We have to do it. Are we investing enough? I think we're doing the top part, and I think everyone's aware of it and doing it because now they can't afford to not do it. So it's more like, oh my God, I have to get onto that bandwagon. But are we able to take it down to the levels? I don't think so yet. I don't know whether, you go randomly and ask anyone, hey, do you think that this organization or the journey of time that you're going to be here is going to give you what you want? Firstly, they are not too clear because it's just a job. It starts from there, the gap. And then secondly, they don't know where to go about it. So that's why the conversation and the link is important.
It's about whether it's a job or a career. What do you think, Anil?
I probably belong to a different generation. So, the fact of the matter is that one of the things which I used to put it about a couple of years back, not that I had to do it, but I regularly used to put the top tech universities in the top MBA course. Of course, I used to help the team, trillion people, but I used to spend a lot of time with this group of students, some of the professors, trying to get, what are going around in these minds of people. And that has been a big, big change. because early 90s, mid 90s, I used to introduce at these schools, colleges. The mantra was, I want to join a place where I learn, where I grow. There was a stage where people used to say that, when are you moving me to the US? That was a stage.
That's a big thing here.
Then we went through a change where the top 10% or about 20% of the class never even applied for a job. Because they wanted to go in for the highest, they were not looking for a job. The world has changed, and now I think we have reached a situation where each one has a choice, and I'm not able to find an average amongst the class of 60 or class of 80. All 80 seem to be thinking differently, but the common LCM to that is, I want to work in a place where I enjoy working, and my culture fits into that kind of a culture. And obviously, I will learn and grow and all that. And then no one is signing up with you for 10 years or 15 years. They're signing up for 3 and 4 years. Whether it is good or bad, time is going to say that. But I think the organizations have also figured out, saying that, okay, I'm going to have an higher attrition, youngsters are going to leave. Some of them are becoming entrepreneurs, some of them are going and joining startups, some of them are going for higher studies, some of them are just quitting and doing something else in life. Organizations are figuring out. And I think it's probably much, much less of a job and more of a career/passion. And, unfortunately or fortunately, we are talking of a generation today where they probably don't have that kind of a financial pressure, which our generation would have gone through, that, when we came out of our universities. So they're sort of taken care of. So that's not a pressure point for them, for most of them.
Yeah.
And I think these are some of the things which happen, but answer your question, it's more of career/passion and less of job.
I think that brings us to the point, and Shashank, I love your views on this. Basically, we are talking about branding ourselves for people who are building their careers, where we are selling them up for success, right? I think that's the agenda of any of this conversation, being in TED conversations or untapped conversations that we have had today. So, are we really investing enough right now?
See, we are, but if you ask me, there are other things we're also looking at. Like, I think very soon as such, in the future, what matters is not about what the company has done or what is the company. I think it's a kind of people experiences are going to come through. It's not about what the company is going to offer. It's about what kind of experiences is the employees going through. What kind of values are they really showcasing about the organization? What kind of segments are they working with? Because most of the branding thing is not built across. It's only earned is what I believe in. So yes, if you ask me, investing, that is a good thing. But I think it's going to take a longer time to do it, because like he was talking about, leadership takes about 12 or 13, 18 months to deliver something. So I think it's an investment. We need to keep doing it. And like I said, it's not built, but it's earned.
Amazing insights. I think when we began the conversation, there was a pre-pandemic and post-pandemic kind of a conversation. But I would love to classify this conversation as pre-conversation and post-conversation, just because of the length and breadth that we spoke about, right? In terms of people, the jobs that we do, the careers that they explore, the people who are the spokesperson that we interface with, or the alumni who are actually chosen a different path, but still are carrying the name tag along with us, and just the sheer perspective of how this is all going to contribute to each of our journeys itself. But thank you so much for invaluable insights that you guys gave here. It's been a pleasure having a conversation with all of you, and looking forward to such enriching conversations.
And likewise, thank
Thank
you
you so much.
for doing this talk well.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, employer branding has to manage make people happy. That's simple as that. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.